The antiseptic smell hit me first sharp, unforgiving. 8 months pregnant, alone, counting breaths in a private clinic where silence cost money. I thought I was safe here. Anonymous. Invisible. Then the air changed. I didn't have to turn around to know who stood behind me. Some instincts are carved too deep to forget. Power has a gravity of its own. When I finally looked up, his eyes were already on my stomach. Dominic Russo, the man who divorced me without a word, the man who once loved me like a war. In that single glance, he understood everything. And just like that, the life I'd hidden shattered. The antiseptic smell of the clinic was sharp enough to sting the back of my throat. It clung to everything: the pale walls, the polished floor, even my clothes, like a reminder that this place existed for truths people weren't always ready to face. I shifted in the leather chair, one hand instinctively settling over the curve of my stomach. 8 months. My body no longer belonged only to me. Every breath, every movement carried the quiet presence of another life, one I had learned to protect with silence. The waiting room was hushed, expensive in the way only private clinics in Manhattan could be. No crying babies, no anxious chatter, just muted footsteps and the low hum of wealth disguised as calm. I was out of place here, and I knew it. My dress was simple, my shoes worn, my hair pulled back without care. I looked like someone passing through a world she no longer belonged to. Ms. Whitman. I looked up at the receptionist and nodded. She smiled politely, the kind of smile trained to reveal nothing. The doctor is running a few minutes behind. Please make yourself comfortable, as if comfort were possible these days. I picked up a magazine from the glass table, flipping pages without seeing them. My mind drifted, as it often did, to the past I tried not to touch. 6 months. That was how long it had been since I signed my name on divorce papers across a dark wooden desk in a Boston law office. 6 months since Dominic Russo had looked at me with eyes so empty they felt colder than hatred. He hadn't fought me. He hadn't begged. He hadn't even asked if I was sure. He had simply let me go. 2 weeks later, I found out I was pregnant. The memory tightened something in my chest, and I pressed my palm more firmly against my belly, feeling a gentle roll beneath my skin. My baby moved often these days, as if reminding me that no matter how quiet I tried to live, life itself refused to be ignored. The clinic door opened. Cold air swept in, carrying with it the faint scent of rain and something else, something darker, familiar. My spine stiffened before my mind caught up. Some instincts don't fade. They wait. I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. The space behind me felt occupied, heavy, as if the room had tilted, gravity subtly rearranged. Slowly, reluctantly, I lifted my eyes. He stood near the entrance, tall and unmistakable, dressed in black as if the color had been woven into his identity. His coat fit him perfectly, the lines sharp, deliberate. His dark hair was shorter than I remembered, his jaw rough with shadow. There was a thin scar cutting through one eyebrow, a mark I had once traced with my fingertips in the quiet hours of night. Dominic Russo, my ex-husband, the man I had loved with a devotion that had nearly destroyed me. Time stretched thin. The world narrowed to the space between us. His gaze moved across the room with lazy authority, taking in everything without urgency until it found me. When our eyes met, something flickered. Surprise, perhaps, or recognition layered with disbelief. Then his eyes dropped. To my stomach. The air seemed to crystallize. I couldn't breathe, couldn't look away. My hand remained frozen over the curve of my belly, as if I could hide it by sheer will. Beneath my palm, the baby kicked strong, insistent at the worst possible moment. Dominic's jaw tightened, just slightly. Anyone else might not have noticed. But I had lived with this man long enough to recognize the smallest shifts. That was the look he wore right before making decisions that couldn't be undone. He took a step forward. My pulse roared in my ears. Every sensible thought screamed at me to stand, to leave, to run, but my body refused to obey. I was rooted to the chair, caught between fear and something far more dangerous. Recognition. He stopped a few feet away, close enough that I could smell his cologne cedar and something smoky beneath it, close enough that the memories rushed back uninvited nights wrapped in silk sheets, his arms around me like a shield, his voice murmuring promises in the dark. Claire, my name, in his voice, still did things to me, low, rough, intimate. It had always sounded like a claim. Dominic. I replied, my throat dry. His eyes returned to my stomach, slower this time, intent, calculating. I watched understanding settle into his expression piece by piece, like a puzzle snapping together. How far along, he asked. The question was quiet. Too quiet. 8 months. He exhaled slowly. I could almost see the numbers turning in his mind, the dates aligning with brutal precision. When his gaze lifted back to mine, it was no longer uncertain. Mine, he said. The word landed with terrifying finality. I should have denied it. Should have lied. Should have protected myself better. But something about the way he said it, like he already knew. Like the truth was inevitable, stripped the words from my tongue. You divorced me, I said instead, my voice trembling despite my efforts. You walked away. Pain flashed across his face, raw and unguarded, gone almost as quickly as it appeared. And I have regretted it every day since. Before I could respond, he lowered himself in front of me, crouching until we were eye level. The movement was unexpected, intimate. People didn't kneel before Dominic Russo. Slowly, as if giving me time to pull away, he reached out and placed his hand over my stomach. His touch was firm, gentle, reverent. The baby kicked again, stronger this time. Dominic froze, for a heartbeat. The world cracked open, and I saw something I had never seen on his face before. Wonder, pure and unfiltered. His other hand joined the first, as if afraid the moment might vanish if he didn't hold it still. Why didn't you tell me? He asked softly. I swallowed. You didn't want me anymore. That was never true. The receptionist cleared her throat nervously from behind the desk. Mr. Russo, Dr. Hale is ready to see you. Cancel it, Dominic said without looking away from me. There was a pause. Then the quiet, unmistakable sound of compliance. He stood and offered me his hand, not commanding, not forcing. Waiting. We're leaving, he said. You're not doing this alone, not anymore. I stared at his hand, at the man who had once broken my heart by letting me go too easily. The man who now looked at me like I was something precious he had nearly lost forever. Every instinct warned me that taking his hand meant stepping back into a world of shadows and power and danger. But another truth rose just as clearly. He had never truly let me go. And the moment my fingers curled into his, I knew whatever came next would change everything. If this story touched your heart, follow the channel to enjoy many more heart-stirring stories every week. The car moved through Manhattan like a shadow, smooth and silent, cutting through rain-slicked streets that blurred into streaks of white and gold outside the tinted windows. I sat rigid in the back seat, Dominic beside me, his presence filling the space without effort. He hadn't touched me since helping me into the car, yet I felt him everywhere, his heat, his awareness, the quiet intensity that wrapped around me like an invisible net. My hands rested on my stomach, fingers laced together as if guarding a secret that had already been exposed. The baby shifted beneath my palms, a slow, rolling movement that reminded me this wasn't a nightmare I could wake from. This was real. All of it. Where are we going? I finally asked. Breaking the silence. Dominic turned his head slightly, studying me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Somewhere safe. That's not an answer. It's the only one you need right now. I let out a humorless breath and looked away, watching the city slide past. You don't get to decide that for me anymore. A muscle in his jaw tightened. You're carrying my child. I'm carrying my child, I corrected softly. You signed away the right to decide my life when you signed those papers. The car slowed at a red light. Dominic didn't respond immediately. When he did, his voice was lower, stripped of command and edged with something dangerously close to regret. I signed those papers because I thought letting you go would keep you alive. The words settled between us, heavy and unexpected. I turned back to him. Alive from what? From me. The light changed. The car moved again. I laughed quietly, a sound without humor. You don't get to rewrite history now. You didn't say any of this then. You didn't say anything. I know. The admission surprised me. Dominic Russo was not a man known for accepting blame. You looked at me like I was already gone. I continued, my voice trembling despite my effort to stay calm. Like I was an inconvenience you'd already erased. His hand flexed against his knee. Because if I'd let myself feel anything, I wouldn't have let you walk out that door. The memory surged back unbidden. 6 months earlier. Boston. The law office had smelled of old paper and bitterness. Dominic sat across from me in a tailored suit, dark eyes unreadable, hands folded neatly on the table. He looked composed, detached, like this was just another transaction. The lawyer spoke, words blurred together. Assets, agreements, finality. I'd waited for Dominic to interrupt, to object, to say something, anything. He never did. When it was time to sign, he pushed the pen toward me without meeting my eyes. I signed with shaking hands. So did he. No tears, no arguments, no goodbye. I walked out alone, believing I'd been the easiest thing in his life to give up. The car turned into a private drive lined with tall iron gates. They opened without pause. I stiffened. Dominic? You're not a prisoner, he said, reading the tension in my body. I promise. Promises from him were dangerous things. They tended to come wrapped in steel. The house appeared beyond the gates modern, expansive, all glass and stone nestled into the hills overlooking the city. It was beautiful in a way that felt distant, curated, controlled. He helped me out of the car, his hand hovering near my back without touching, as if unsure whether he was allowed. The restraint unsettled me more than possession would have. Inside, the air was foreign, scented faintly with white tea and citrus. The space was quiet, immaculate. Sit, he said gently, gesturing toward a sofa. Please. I sat, my body aching from the day's emotional toll. Dominic remained standing, pacing once before stopping in front of me. Claire, he began, then stopped. He scrubbed a hand over his face, the gesture uncharacteristically human. There are things you don't know, things I didn't want you anywhere near. Then you should have trusted me enough to decide that for myself. His gaze snapped up. Something fierce flickered there, then faded into something heavier. I trusted you too much. That was the problem. I frowned. What does that mean? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked to the window, staring out at the city like it held ghosts only he could see. 3 weeks before the divorce, he said finally, someone inside my organization sold information to a rival family. Names, locations, schedules. My stomach clenched. You never told me that. No, because the information included your name. The room seemed to tilt. What they knew where you shopped, where you walked, where you slept. His voice dropped. They knew you were my weakness. I stood despite the heaviness in my body. So you divorced me to protect me. I divorced you because I was one bad night away from starting a war, he said quietly. And I couldn't risk you being collateral. Anger surged, sharp and sudden. You decided all of that without asking me. You stripped me of choice. Yes, he said, meeting my eyes without flinching, and I would do it again if it meant keeping you alive. The baby moved sharply, as if reacting to my racing pulse. I pressed a hand to my belly, breathing through it. "You don't get to be the hero in this story," I said. "You broke me." Pain flickered across his face, unguarded. "I know." Silence stretched. Then I asked the question that had been coiled in my chest since the clinic. "If you were watching out for me, why didn't you know I was pregnant?" His expression darkened. "Because after the divorce, I pulled my men back. I told myself you deserved privacy. A real life, not shadows following you everywhere." Bitterness twisted in my chest. "That's ironic. I found out 3 weeks ago," he continued, "when one of my security teams flagged unusual activity near a women's health clinic. I didn't know it was you at first. When I did..." He stopped. His voice roughened. "I didn't come to you because I was afraid. Of me. Of losing you again. The honesty disarmed me more than anger ever could. You don't get to erase 6 months of silence with fear." I said softly, "I'm not asking you to forget." He replied, "I'm asking you to let me explain." I sank back onto the sofa, exhausted. "Then explain." "There's someone out there," Dominic said. "Someone watching women connected to men like me. Pregnant women." Cold crept into my veins. "Why, we don't know yet. But it's not coincidence." He looked at my stomach, then back at my face. "That's why I won't let you leave unprotected. I won't live in a cage." "You won't," he said firmly. "But you also won't walk alone." I studied him, the man who had loved me, abandoned me, and now stood before me stripped of certainty. For the first time, I saw not the Mafia boss, but the man beneath the power, standing on the edge of a mistake he couldn't afford to repeat. "I'm not your wife anymore," I said. His gaze softened, but his voice was steady. "You're still the mother of my child. That doesn't mean I belong to you." "No," he agreed quietly. "It means I belong to you." The words caught me off guard, lodging somewhere deep and dangerous. Outside, the sun dipped lower, painting the sky in bruised shades of purple and gold. Inside, nothing was resolved. But one truth was unmistakable. The divorce had ended our marriage. It had not ended our story. Morning arrived quietly, filtered through floor-to-ceiling windows and softened by sheer curtains that turned sunlight into something almost gentle. I woke disoriented, my body heavy, my mind slow to catch up. For one brief, treacherous second, I forgot where I was. Then I remembered. The house, the gates, Dominic. I lay still, one hand resting on my stomach, feeling the familiar pressure beneath my palm. The baby shifted, a slow, comforting movement that grounded me. Whatever chaos surrounded me, this life was real, constant, mine. The bedroom was spacious and minimal, all pale wood and muted colors. It didn't feel like a cage, exactly. More like a place designed not to offend, not to invite too much emotion. I swung my legs over the side of the bed and stood carefully, stretching my back with a quiet hiss of discomfort. 8 months pregnant left very little room for grace. As I padded toward the bathroom, I noticed small details I hadn't seen the night before: a folded robe laid out on the chair, slippers by the door, a glass of water on the bedside table. Someone had thought about my comfort. The thought unsettled me more than neglect would have. When I stepped out again, freshly washed and dressed in borrowed clothes that somehow fit perfectly, the house was awake. Soft footsteps echoed somewhere down the hall. The low murmur of voices drifted from a distant room. I followed the sound. Dominic stood in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, dark hair slightly mussed, speaking quietly into a phone. He looked different here, less imposing without his coat, more human without the armor of public authority. Still dangerous, just closer. "Yes," he said into the phone, his tone controlled. "Keep eyes on the perimeter. I want updates every hour." He ended the call as he sensed me, turning slowly. His gaze swept over me, not in appraisal, but in something like relief. "You slept," he said. I was exhausted. His eyes flicked briefly to my stomach. "How are you feeling?" The question sounded careful. Considered. "Fine," I replied. Then, after a pause, "Hungry." A corner of his mouth lifted, almost imperceptibly. "Good." Breakfast was already laid out. Fruit, toast, eggs prepared simply, tea instead of coffee. He watched me notice it, then added, "I remembered what you liked, and what made you nauseous." Of course he did. I sat at the counter, moving slowly, while Dominic poured tea into a mug and set it in front of me. He didn't hover, didn't touch. The restraint felt deliberate, like he was giving me space to decide how close I would let him stand. "I'm not staying here permanently," I said, breaking the quiet. "I didn't assume you would." I looked up, surprised. "You didn't—" "No." He leaned against the counter opposite me. "I assumed you'd want time. And control." The word hung between us. "That's new," I said. "It's learned." He replied simply. I studied his face, searching for sarcasm or manipulation. I found neither. Just tension. Patience stretched thin by fear. "I want to see my apartment," I said. "My things. My life." He nodded once. "We can arrange that." Without guards following me, his jaw tightened. "That part is not negotiable. I won't be watched like an object." "You won't be watched," he corrected. "You'll be protected. Those are not the same thing." "No," he agreed quietly. "They aren't." For a moment, I thought he would push. Instead, he said, "Let me earn your trust, or don't. But don't confuse caution with control." I didn't respond. I focused on eating, on the ordinary act of chewing toast while my world balanced on something far from stable. After breakfast, he showed me the rest of the house, not like a tour, more like an invitation. He let me walk ahead, choose where to go, linger where I wanted. I noticed security cameras discreetly tucked into corners, the way hallways curved gently instead of ending abruptly, how every door felt solid, intentional, designed for safety or containment. The nursery stopped me cold. I hadn't known it existed. The room was bathed in soft light. Walls painted a pale sage that instantly soothed something tight in my chest. A crib stood assembled near the window, shelves lined with books, a rocking chair positioned just so. I turned slowly to Dominic. "When did you do this?" 3 weeks ago, he said. "After I knew." "You didn't ask me what I wanted." I listened. He replied, "For years." That was unfair. And terrifyingly accurate. My throat tightened. "You don't get to build a future without my consent." "I know." His voice softened. "That's why nothing here is permanent. You don't like it. We change it. Or remove it." I ran my fingers along the crib rail, emotions tangling painfully. "You really believe you can just step into this role I don't believe?" He said. "I commit." The baby kicked, hard enough to steal my breath. Instinctively, I gasped and pressed a hand to my stomach. Dominic was at my side in an instant, concern flaring openly across his face. "What is it?" "She's fine," I breathed, then laughed softly. "Just reminding us she has opinions." Something in his expression shifted wonder blooming again, unguarded and raw. He reached out, then stopped himself, his hand hovering. "May I?" I hesitated, then nodded. His palm rested lightly against my stomach. When the baby kicked again, his breath caught audibly. He closed his eyes, just for a moment, like a man absorbing a prayer. "I will not fail her," he said quietly. "Or you." I looked at him then, not as the man who broke my heart, not as the force of fear he represented, but as someone standing on unfamiliar ground, trying to be careful with something fragile. A sound interrupted us, a sharp, controlled knock at the door. Dominic straightened instantly, all softness gone. Stay here. A man entered tall, composed, eyes alert. He spoke low enough that I wasn't meant to hear, but tension carried. We confirmed the pattern. He said, "It's not random." Dominic's gaze hardened. Who else? 5 others. All pregnant. All connected? Connected. My blood ran cold. Dominic turned back to me. Expression carefully neutral, but I saw the storm beneath. "We'll talk later," he said gently. But it was already too late. I understood then whatever danger surrounded me had existed long before I walked into that clinic. And whatever Dominic was trying to protect me from, it wasn't a shadow he could simply lock outside the gate. As he left the room, moving with lethal focus, I stood alone in the nursery, one hand on my stomach, the other gripping the crib rail. For the first time since the divorce, I wasn't afraid of being pulled back into Dominic Russo's world. I was afraid of what had already followed me there. The house felt different after that conversation, not quieter if anything. There were more subtle sounds, footsteps moving with purpose, low voices behind closed doors, the soft click of doors that didn't slam, but the air had shifted. It carried tension now, like a held breath that hadn't yet decided whether to become a scream or a prayer. I spent the afternoon in the garden, seated beneath a broad olive tree whose branches filtered the sun into fractured light. The warmth soothed my back, eased the constant ache that had become my companion in the final weeks of pregnancy. Somewhere beyond the tall hedges, the world continued traffic, strangers, normal lives, but here, everything felt suspended, protected, isolated. I wasn't sure which frightened me more. Dominic hadn't returned since the man delivered his report. He hadn't sent messages or instructions. That, too, felt intentional. A restraint I didn't trust. The baby stirred, slow and heavy, and I rested both hands over my stomach. "I know," I murmured softly. "I feel it too." Footsteps approached on the stone path. I looked up, bracing myself for Dominic's presence, but it wasn't him. It was a woman, perhaps in her early 40s, dressed simply but with an efficiency that spoke of competence rather than modesty. Dark hair pulled into a neat knot, calm eyes that assessed without intruding. "Ms. Whitman," she said gently. "I'm Elena. I work with Dominic." I didn't miss the careful choice of words. "With, not for, I didn't ask for company," I replied. "No," she agreed. "But you deserve information." That caught my attention. I gestured to the empty chair across from me. She sat, folding her hands in her lap. "There's been activity," Elena said. "People asking questions they shouldn't. Patterns forming where none should exist." "You're talking about the women," I said quietly. "Yes." My throat tightened. Why hasn't Dominic told me everything? Because he's trying to decide how much truth you can bear without walking away. I met her gaze sharply. That's not his decision to make. A faint smile touched her lips. "No, it isn't. That's why I'm here," she explained carefully. No gore, no unnecessary detail, just enough to paint a picture I wished I couldn't see. Someone was collecting data, not just watching, but cataloging. Pregnant women connected to powerful men, timelines, movements, weaknesses. "Extortion?" I asked. "Possibly," Elena replied. "Or something worse." The baby kicked suddenly, sharply, and I gasped. Elena's eyes softened. This is why Dominic is intense. Fear does that to him. It doesn't excuse control. I said, "No," she agreed, but it explains it. When Elena left, I stayed where I was long after the sun dipped lower, shadows stretching across the garden like fingers. My mind churned, assembling pieces into shapes I didn't like. Dominic wasn't just afraid. He was preparing for war. He found me at dusk. I sensed him before I saw him, the quiet authority of his presence, the way the world seemed to orient around him without permission. He stopped a few steps away, giving me space. "You spoke to Elena," he said. "Yes." He nodded once. I told her she could. That surprised me. Why? Because you're not fragile, he replied. And because I was wrong to think I could protect you by withholding truth. I stood slowly, my back protesting. Then don't withhold it now. We faced each other in the fading light. He looked tired. Not physically, Dominic always carried himself with relentless control, but something deeper had worn him down. His eyes were darker, his movements sharper, as if he were holding himself together through will alone. There is a line, I said quietly. One I won't cross. His jaw tightened. I know. If protecting me means hurting people indiscriminately, I don't hurt indiscriminately. If it means turning me into a symbol, a hostage, a justification, I would never. If it means raising our child in fear, I finished, my voice trembling. Then I will leave, no matter how dangerous that is. Silence fell. Dominic stepped closer, not invading my space, but close enough that I could feel the heat of him. I will never put blood on her hands, he said softly. Or yours. You already live with blood on yours. Yes, he admitted. And that is precisely why I won't let it touch you. I searched his face for lies, for the manipulation I'd once been too trusting to see. What I found instead was something raw. A man standing at the edge of his own nature, trying clumsily, fiercely to be more than it. You don't trust me, he said. I trust that you love us. I replied. I don't trust what that love might make you do. The honesty hurt us both. He exhaled slowly. Then tell me what you need. The question felt like a gift wrapped in uncertainty. I need choice. I said, real choice, not the illusion of it. You have it. I need to be part of the decisions that affect my life. He nodded. Agreed. And I need to know, I added, my hand drifting to my stomach, that if the time comes when I say stop, you will... He didn't answer immediately. That pause terrified me. Then he said, very quietly, if you say stop, I will listen. Even if it costs you, his eyes lifted to mine, dark and unflinching. Even then, the words settled into me, heavy and fragile. That night, sleep eluded me. I lay in bed, listening to the subtle sounds of a house that never fully rested. Somewhere, Dominic was awake too. I could feel it. The way I always had. Sometime past midnight, pain rippled low in my abdomen. Not sharp, not urgent, just enough to steal my breath. I sat up slowly, pressing a hand to my stomach. Easy, I whispered. The door opened almost immediately. Dominic stood there, already dressed, concern written openly across his face. What is it? I don't know. I said, probably nothing. He crossed the room in 2 strides, kneeling in front of me without hesitation. His hands hovered, uncertain. May I? I nodded. His touch was careful, reverent, as if I were made of glass. We'll call the doctor, he said, just to be sure. I caught his wrist gently. Don't panic. His mouth curved into a humorless smile. I don't panic. I prepare, despite myself. I smiled faintly. That tracks. The pain faded as quickly as it came, leaving exhaustion in its wake. Dominic didn't move away. He stayed there, grounded, solid. I won't cage you, he said suddenly. I swear it. I believed he meant it. Whether he could keep that promise was another question entirely. As I lay back against the pillows, his hand resting lightly over mine, I realized something with a clarity that startled me. The danger wasn't just outside these walls. It lived in the space between love and fear, and we were both standing right in the middle of it. The storm broke just before dawn. Rain lashed against the windows in sudden, violent sheets, as if the sky itself had finally lost patience. I woke to the sound, heart racing, the echo of thunder vibrating through my ribs. For a moment, I lay still, listening not to the rain, but to the house, to the quiet movements that told me Dominic was already awake. He always was. These days. I pushed myself upright, breathing through the familiar tightness in my back. The baby shifted uneasily, reacting to my tension. "It's all right," I whispered, more to myself than to her. "I'm here." The words felt fragile. I found Dominic in his office. The room no longer looked like a place meant for work. It had become something closer to a war room, screens glowing with live feeds, maps marked with discrete symbols, files stacked with ruthless order. He stood at the center of it, sleeves rolled up, hands braced against the edge of his desk, staring at something I couldn't see. He didn't turn when I entered. He knew I was there. "You shouldn't be in here," he said quietly. "That's not your decision anymore," I replied. That made him look at me. For a split second, something flickered across his face, relief. Maybe tangled with concern. "You shouldn't hear this. I already know enough," I said, "and there's something you don't." The storm thundered again, closer this time. Dominic straightened slowly. "What are you talking about?" I took a breath. Then another. I'd carried this secret for months, wrapped it in justification and fear, told myself silence was mercy. Now it felt like a poison. 6 months ago, I said, before the divorce, I found something. The room seemed to narrow around us. "What kind of something?" he asked. I stepped farther inside, forcing myself not to retreat. "I found proof that someone in your inner circle was leaking information. Not to a rival family, to someone who wasn't supposed to exist." Dominic's expression hardened, his body going very still. "Why didn't you tell me? Because the name attached to it would have destroyed you." Silence fell like a blade. I swallowed. "It was your cousin." The word hung there. Irreversible. Dominic closed his eyes briefly, as if struck. When he opened them, they were darker than I had ever seen. Not angry, empty. "Say it again," he said softly. "It was Mateo," I repeated. "I saw the transfer records. Messages. Locations. He was selling fragments, never enough to trace back to him directly. Always enough to keep someone interested." Dominic turned away from me, one hand pressing against the desk as if grounding himself. "You're telling me this now?" "Yes. You knew," he said. "And you let me sign those papers believing you betrayed me." Pain lanced through my chest. "I let you believe I was distant, cold, uncommitted. I didn't let you believe I betrayed you. You let me leave you. I let you live." He laughed once, a short, broken sound. "You don't get to decide who lives for me." "I know," I said quietly. But I did it anyway. I told him everything then. How I'd overheard a conversation I wasn't meant to hear. How I'd followed the trail carefully, terrified of what I might uncover. How I'd realized that if Dominic confronted Mateo without airtight proof, the fallout would be catastrophic, blood spilling through family lines that could never be repaired. I said, my voice trembling now, that if I removed myself, if I became irrelevant, the threat would fade, that Mateo would stop. Dominic turned back to me slowly. And did he? No. I admitted. He escalated. The truth settled between us, heavy and damning. "You left to protect me," he said. "And I divorced you to protect you." "Yes." A bitter smile curved his mouth. "We're idiots. Despite everything." A tear slipped free. "We were scared." He crossed the room in 2 strides, stopping just short of touching me. His hand lifted, hesitated, then dropped again. "You should have trusted me," he said. "I trusted you too much." I replied. "I knew what you would do if you found out, and I couldn't live with that on my conscience." His jaw clenched. "Mateo is family, not the kind you protect at any cost." The rain battered harder, thunder rolling low and ominous. "There's more," I said. His eyes snapped back to mine. "Of course there is." "The person behind the surveillance," I continued, "isn't acting alone. Mateo isn't the end game. He's the doorway. Dominic went still again. Explain. I don't know who's on the other side. I admitted. But whoever it is understands leverage. They're not trying to hurt us yet. They're trying to position us. For what? For a choice. The baby kicked sharply, as if punctuating the word. Dominic exhaled slowly. They're forcing my hand. Yes, I said, and they'll use her to do it if we're not careful. The word her changed something. It always did. He finally reached for me then, his hand closing gently around my wrist. Not possessive, not commanding, grounding. You should have told me, he said again, softer now. I know. He looked at me for a long moment, something fierce and aching warring behind his eyes. Then, to my surprise, he lowered himself slowly, kneeling in front of me as he had at the clinic. I need you with me, he said quietly. Not protected from me, not silent. With me. My throat tightened. I'm not built for your world. No, he agreed, but you see it more clearly than most who live in it. He rested his hand over my stomach, reverent. The baby moved, a slow, rolling motion that made his breath catch. They will not touch you, he said. Either of you. At what cost? He met my eyes. Whatever it takes. The old fear stirred, but this time, it wasn't alone. It was joined by something steadier. Resolve. Then we do this together, I said. No secrets, no unilateral decisions. He nodded once. Agreed. A sharp sound cut through the room, a phone vibrating against the desk. Dominic answered it without breaking eye contact with me. Yes, he said. A pause. Then his expression changed. Where another pause. We'll be there. He ended the call slowly. They made a move, he said. Mateo, no, Dominic replied, his voice cold and precise. Someone closer. My heart stuttered. Closer how they were watching your old apartment, he said. Before I ever brought you here. Ice flooded my veins. Dominic stood, placing one steadying hand at my back. We don't have much time. For what? For them to realize, he said, guiding me toward the door, that you're not leverage anymore. What am I? Then, he looked down at me, something fierce and unwavering in his gaze. You're the line they shouldn't have crossed. As thunder cracked overhead, I knew with chilling clarity that the truth I'd buried to save him had finally surfaced, and it was going to cost us both far more than silence ever had. We didn't leave the house. Instead, the house transformed. Within an hour, it no longer felt like a place designed for comfort or beauty. It became something else entirely alive with quiet urgency. Men moved through corridors with practiced efficiency, voices low, eyes sharp. Doors that were usually left open closed softly. Screens flickered on in rooms I hadn't known existed. Dominic didn't order me to stay put. He didn't have to. I sat in the living room, hands folded over my stomach, listening to a world I'd tried so hard to stay outside of hum into motion around me. This wasn't panic. Panic was loud. This was preparation. Elena appeared beside me with a glass of water before I realized I was thirsty. Try to drink, she said gently. I obeyed, grateful for the grounding normalcy of the act. What happens now? That depends, she replied, choosing her words carefully, on whether they realize how much they've already revealed. Which is that they're impatient. I looked up at her. Impatient people make mistakes. Yes, she agreed, and dangerous ones. From across the room, Dominic watched me not openly, but with an awareness that never loosened. When our eyes met, something unspoken passed between us. Not reassurance, not command, connection. He came to me a few minutes later, crouching so we were level. I need to step out for a short time, he said quietly. My pulse spiked. Out where to finish a conversation they started, he replied. I'll be reachable. I won't be far. You said no unilateral decisions. I'm not deciding, he said. I'm informing. The distinction mattered. I searched his face, weighing fear against trust. How dangerous is this? A muscle in his jaw tightened. Enough that I don't want you to know the details. I almost smiled. Almost. Then I don't want you to go. He exhaled slowly. If I don't, they'll come here next. The baby moved sharply, reacting to the tension in my body. I placed Dominic's hand over my stomach without thinking. He froze, then relaxed when another kick followed. I'll be back before she notices I'm gone, he murmured. That's not how babies work. A corner of his mouth lifted. I'm learning. He stood, but before he could turn away, I caught his sleeve. Dominic, yes. Come back. He looked down at me then, really looked, and something in his expression softened dangerously. Always. When he left, the house seemed to hold its breath. Night fell heavy and humid, the sky pressing low against the windows. I tried to read, failed, tried to rest, failed again. The baby was restless, rolling and shifting, as if sensing that the world outside had sharpened its teeth. I stood and walked slowly to the window, ignoring Elena's quiet look of concern. From here, the city glowed in the distance, beautiful and indifferent. Somewhere out there, Dominic was moving through shadows I had once begged him not to pull me into. Now, I was already there. Time stretched thin. Every sound felt louder. Every passing minute tightened something in my chest. When my phone vibrated, I startled violently. It wasn't Dominic. Unknown number. I stared at the screen, ice creeping up my spine. Elena noticed immediately. Don't answer, she said. The phone stopped vibrating. Then it buzzed again. A message appeared. You shouldn't have come back to him. My breath left me in a rush. They know, I whispered. Elena's jaw set. Give it to me. Before I could move, another message arrived. He can't protect you from what's coming. My hand shook as I typed. Who is this? The response came instantly. Someone who understands leverage. Elena swore under her breath, already moving. Voices rose elsewhere in the house, sharp and clipped. The calm fractured. Then the pain hit. It wasn't like before. This was sharper, deeper, a tight band wrapping low around my abdomen, stealing my breath. I gasped, gripping the edge of the window frame. Elena? I breathed. She was at my side instantly. Sit, now. Another wave followed, stronger. My vision blurred at the edges. It's too early, I whispered, fear blooming hot and wild. It's too early. Elena's voice was steady, grounding. Breathe. We're calling the doctor. As if summoned by the words. My phone lit up again. Dominic. I answered without thinking. Something's wrong. I know, he said. No questions. No hesitation. I'm on my way. How they wanted me distracted. He continued, his voice dark and controlled. They underestimated how closely I'd tied myself to you. Another contraction rolled through me, and I cried out softly despite myself. Elena has you, he asked. Yes. Good. Don't move unless she tells you to. I'm scared. I admitted. A pause. Just a breath. Me too, he said. But I won't let anything happen to you. Or her. The call ended. Everything moved fast after that. The doctor arrived within minutes, too fast for coincidence. Elena stayed with me, one hand firm and reassuring on my shoulder, the other coordinating quietly through an earpiece. I focused on breathing, on the rhythm of pain and release, on the small life inside me responding to the chaos with stubborn insistence. She's strong, the doctor said after checking the monitors. But we need to slow this down. What does that mean? I asked. Dread coiling. It means stress is a factor, she replied gently. And that stress needs to stop. A bitter laugh escaped me. That's not really an option. Footsteps thundered down the hall. Dominic burst into the room like a storm breaking containment. His eyes went straight to me, to the monitors, to the doctor. He took in everything in seconds. "What do you need?" he asked. "Quiet," the doctor said firmly. "Stability." Dominic nodded once. Then he did something unexpected. He knelt beside me, took my hand, and pressed it flat against his chest. "Feel that," he murmured. His heartbeat was fast, steady, alive. "I'm here," he said. "I'm not going anywhere." The pain ebbed slightly, as if my body believed him. The doctor worked quickly, efficiently. Medication, monitoring, instructions. When she finally stepped back, her expression eased just a fraction. "We've bought some time," she said. "But you can't go through another scare like this." Dominic's hand tightened around mine. "You won't." The doctor hesitated. There was a message delivered to the gate while I was arriving. Elena stiffened. "What kind of message, an envelope?" The doctor replied. "Addressed to Ms. Whitman?" My blood ran cold. Dominic reached for it before anyone else could. He opened it slowly, eyes scanning the contents. "What is it?" I asked. He looked at me then, and for the first time since this began, I saw something like pure fury break through his control. "A timeline," he said quietly. "They've been watching longer than we thought." "How long?" I whispered. "Since before you left Boston." The room seemed to tilt. Dominic folded the paper carefully, as if keeping it from cutting him. "They wanted you frightened, unstable." "And now?" I asked. "And now?" he said, voice low and lethal. "They've crossed from watching to touching." He leaned down, pressing his forehead gently to mine, his hand never leaving my stomach. "They don't get another move," he whispered. I closed my eyes, exhaustion crashing over me in waves. In the space between one breath and the next, I understood something with aching clarity. This was no longer about power. It was about survival. And the night the world tilted, we crossed into a place where love was no longer just a refuge. It was a weapon. The house did not sleep that night. Neither did I. Morning crept in quietly, pale light slipping through the curtains as if afraid to disturb what had survived the dark. I lay on my side, one hand curved protectively over my stomach, the other tangled in the sheets. The baby was calm now, her earlier unrest replaced by a steady, reassuring presence that grounded me in my body when my thoughts threatened to spiral. Dominic sat in a chair near the window, jacket discarded, shirt sleeves rolled up, his posture deceptively relaxed. He hadn't closed his eyes once since the doctor left. I knew that without looking because this was the Dominic I remembered from long nights years ago, when danger hovered too close for rest. "You should sleep," I said softly. He turned his head, and his expression softened at the sound of my voice. "So should you." I did. A little. His gaze dropped instinctively to my stomach. How is she quiet, stubborn, observant? I smiled faintly. "She takes after you." A breath of a laugh escaped him short. Surprised. Gone almost immediately. "I'm sorry she does." That startled me. Dominic Russo didn't apologize for who he was. "She's already stronger than you think," I said. "So am I." He stood then, crossing the room slowly, as if sudden movement might break something fragile. He stopped beside the bed, but didn't touch me right away. "They want a decision," he said quietly. I didn't ask who they were. We both knew what kind of decision they want me to trade. He replied. "Influence, territory, silence. And if you don't?" His jaw tightened. "They escalate." I searched his face. "You're not considering it." "I am," he said simply. Fear flickered through me, not for myself, but for him. "Dominic." "I won't trade you," he said firmly. "Or her. That's not the negotiation." "Then what is?" He hesitated. Just long enough to tell me this wasn't easy. They want me to step back, publicly, withdraw from certain operations, create the impression of weakness. I frowned. That sounds like a trap. It is, he agreed. But it's also bait. For them. For everyone, he corrected, including the people who think they can replace me. The implications settled heavy and cold. You're talking about reshaping your world, I said. Yes. For us. For her, he replied, resting his hand lightly on my stomach at last. And for you. I covered his hand with mine. And what do you want? The question hung between us, intimate and dangerous. He looked at me then, really looked, and something unguarded surfaced beneath the layers of calculation. I want you safe without needing me to burn everything down. My throat tightened. That's a first. It's a learned desire, he said quietly. You taught me. The door opened softly, and Elena stepped in, her expression grave but composed. We have confirmation, she said. They're moving assets. Quietly. Dominic nodded. Good. Elena glanced at me, then back at him. This puts her at risk. I know. And you're still willing to play along. For now, he replied. On my terms. Elena hesitated, then inclined her head. I'll make the calls. When she left, the room felt smaller. You're planning something, I said. Yes. You're not telling me everything. No. I met his gaze steadily. You promised no more unilateral decisions. He exhaled slowly. I promise to listen when you say stop. And if I say stop now? He didn't answer immediately. That silence hurt more than any argument. Then I would stop, he said finally. And we would run. I blinked. Run. Disappear, he clarified. New names, new places. A life without this. The image was so unexpected it stole my breath. You'd give all this up for you. His expression was steady, serious. Yes. I searched his face for exaggeration, for manipulation. I found none. And you'd resent me for it. I said softly. I might, he admitted, but I would be alive to feel it. The baby moved gently beneath our hands, as if weighing in. I closed my eyes. When I opened them again, my voice was calm. I won't run. Dominic's brows drew together. Claire, I won't raise her on fear. I continued. But I also won't teach her that love means erasing who you are. Something shifted in his expression. Surprise. Then something like respect. You're asking me to fight differently, he said. Yes, to restrain myself. To choose. I corrected. Not react. He studied me for a long moment. Then he nodded once. All right. The word felt momentous. We spent the day planning not strategies or operations, but boundaries. What I would know, what I wouldn't, where I would be included, where I would be protected from knowledge rather than action. It wasn't perfect, but it was a beginning. That evening, as the sun sank low and painted the walls in warm gold, Dominic walked me out to the garden. The air was cool, fragrant with citrus and earth. I used to think power meant never bending, he said suddenly. And now I think it means knowing where to bend so nothing breaks. I stopped walking and turned to him. That's not something you learned alone. No, he agreed. It's something you survive. We stood there in silence, the world momentarily still. Then my phone vibrated. Unknown number. Dominic stiffened instantly. Don't answer. I looked at the screen. A message appeared. You've made your choice. So have we. My heart thudded painfully. They know. Yes, Dominic said quietly. They always do. Another message followed. Tick-tock. Dominic took the phone from my hand gently, his face unreadable. He handed it to Elena moments later without comment. They're forcing the timeline, she said grimly. Dominic nodded. Then we adjust. That night, as I lay in bed with Dominic beside me, fully dressed, alert, his arm curved protectively around me, I stared at the ceiling and thought about choices. Not the ones made in fear, but the ones made in clarity. Whatever was coming, it would test everything we'd rebuilt from the ruins of silence and misunderstanding. And this time, we would face it together, not as enemies of the dark, but as something far more dangerous, a family that refused to break. The first contraction came just after midnight. It was different from the others, deeper, sharper, unmistakable. Pain bloomed low and insistent, stealing the air from my lungs before I could brace myself. I froze, one hand gripping the edge of the mattress, the other instinctively flying to my stomach. Dominic was awake instantly. He didn't ask questions. He didn't hesitate. He was already moving, already kneeling beside the bed, his eyes searching my face with a focus so intense it bordered on terror. "Tell me," he said softly. I think I swallowed, breathing through the tightening wave. I think this is real. The room seemed to contract around us. Dominic's jaw set, but his voice remained steady. "How far apart I don't know yet," I whispered. "It's just starting." He nodded once, the way he did before making decisions that mattered. "All right, we'll move calmly. No rush unless you tell me otherwise." That alone, unless you tell me otherwise, anchored me. Another contraction followed, closer this time. I gasped, fingers digging into the sheets. Dominic's hand closed around mine, warm and solid. "Breathe with me," he murmured. "Look at me." I did. And for the first time since fear began circling us like a predator, I saw it mirrored in his eyes, raw, unfiltered, undeniable. "This isn't how it was supposed to happen," I whispered. "No," he agreed. "But it's happening with me here." The house stirred into motion. Elena appeared first, already dressed. Phone pressed to her ear. The doctor was called. The car was prepared. Security adjusted, tightened, shifted in ways I didn't fully understand, but could feel in the air like metal sliding into place. And then everything fractured. A sharp sound echoed through the lower level of the house. Not loud, not explosive, just wrong. Dominic went still. "What was that?" I asked. Elena's expression hardened. A breach. Time slowed to a viscous crawl. Dominic rose, torn visibly in two directions. Toward the door. Toward me. "Don't go," I said, fear spiking with another contraction. He crouched again immediately, pressing his forehead briefly to mine. "I'm not leaving you," he said firmly. "I'm not choosing one over the other." Another sound closer this time. Voices, raised, urgent. Elena swore under her breath. "They're testing the perimeter." Dominic turned to her, his voice low and lethal. "Hold them, I will," she replied. But you need to decide." He looked back at me, eyes dark and blazing with conflict. The pain surged again, stronger, undeniable now. I cried out softly, clutching his hand. "Dominic," I breathed. "Look at me." He did. "This is it," I said. "This is the moment that defines everything you told me you wanted to be." His breathing was uneven. "I know. If you leave now," I continued, forcing the words through the pain, "you might win your war, and lose you," he finished. Yes, the choice crystallized in the space between us. Dominic stood and turned sharply to Elena. "Initiate fallback. All teams converge inward. I'm not engaging." Elena's eyes widened. "Dominic?" "I said I'm not engaging," he repeated, steel threading through every syllable. "If they want me, they come through me here. I'm not leaving her." A beat of stunned silence. Then Elena nodded. Understood. The house locked down. I was moved carefully, urgently into a secure room near the back of the property. Not hidden. Protected. The doctor arrived breathless minutes later, her calm professionalism cutting through the chaos like a lifeline. "You're progressing. she said after a quick examination. Fast. I'm not ready, I whispered, tears stinging my eyes. She's not ready. She doesn't have much choice, the doctor replied gently. But neither do you, and you're not alone. Dominic stayed by my side as the contractions intensified, his presence unwavering. He didn't bark orders. He didn't disappear behind closed doors. He held my hand. Outside the room, I heard muffled voices, movement, the unmistakable tension of men preparing for violence. But it felt distant, unreal, like a storm raging beyond thick glass. Inside, there was only pain and breath and the steady sound of Dominic's voice grounding me. You're doing so well, he murmured. I know it hurts. I know. You don't know. I snapped through clenched teeth. A flicker of a smile touched his mouth. That's fair. The next contraction hit like a breaking wave. I cried out, tears spilling freely now. Dominic wiped them away with trembling fingers. I'm here, he kept saying. I'm right here. A sharp noise echoed again closer than before. The doctor stiffened. What was that? Nothing you need to worry about, Dominic said without looking away from me. But I saw it then, the subtle shift in his posture, the way his free hand curled as if remembering a weapon he wasn't holding. You promised, I whispered. His gaze snapped back to mine. And I'm keeping it. Another contraction tore through me, longer, more insistent. The doctor's expression changed. We're not stopping this, she said. She's coming. Fear and awe collided in my chest. Dominic pressed his forehead to mine. You hear that, he whispered. Our daughter is coming. The words shattered something inside him. I felt it the way his grip tightened. Not in control, but in desperation. The way his voice broke when he spoke her name for the first time. Tentative and reverent. Stay with me, I whispered. I will. He vowed. I swear it. Time lost meaning after that. Pain blurred into rhythm, breath into instinct. Somewhere in the chaos, I felt Dominic's hand against my back, steady and unyielding, as if anchoring me to the world. Then pressure. A scream I didn't recognize as my own. A final, overwhelming push, and a sound. Small, furious, alive. The room froze. The doctor moved quickly, efficiently, but my world narrowed to that sound, the cry of a life insisting on being here. She's here, the doctor said, smiling through the tension. She's here. They placed her on my chest, warm and impossibly real. My hands shook as I touched her, tears blinding me. Dominic made a sound I had never heard from him before, a broken, breathless sob. He dropped to his knees beside the bed, eyes wide, transfixed, undone. His hand hovered, afraid to touch. She's perfect, I whispered. Dominic nodded, unable to speak. A shout echoed faintly from somewhere in the house. Orders barked. Footsteps retreated. The danger past, not gone, but postponed. Dominic didn't move. He didn't look away from us. In that moment, with blood on the sheets and life warm against my skin, the world beyond the room ceased to matter. The war could wait. Because Dominic Russo, feared by men who knew his name, was crying silently at the bedside, hands shaking as he finally touched his daughter. And I knew no matter what came next, he had already chosen. The world didn't end when my daughter was born. It rearranged itself. Morning arrived slowly, cautiously, as if unsure whether it was welcome after the night that had torn everything open. Pale light slipped through reinforced glass, softened by curtains drawn halfway, and settled gently over the room. The air smelled of antiseptic and something warmer beneath it, milk, skin, life. I lay propped against pillows, exhaustion weighing down every limb, my body aching in ways both sharp and distant. My daughter slept against my chest, swaddled tightly, her tiny breaths brushing my skin like whispers. Each rise and fall felt miraculous. Dominic sat beside the bed, not pacing, not commanding, just sitting, elbows resting on his knees, hands clasped together as if in prayer. He hadn't left since the moment she'd been placed in my arms. Not when the doctor finished. Not when the house went quiet again. Not when the first light crept in. He was still there when I opened my eyes. "She's asleep," I murmured. "I know," he said softly. "I've been watching her breathe." I smiled faintly. "You'll wear her out." His gaze flicked to me, something vulnerable flickering across his face. "I don't think that's possible." He stood slowly, careful not to disturb her, and reached out. "May I?" I adjusted her gently, guiding her into his arms. Dominic held his daughter like a man holding something sacred and terrifying. His grip was careful to the point of reverence, one hand cradling her head, the other supporting her small body as if the slightest pressure might break her. She stirred, her face scrunching briefly before relaxing again. Dominic's breath caught. "She trusts me," he whispered. I watched his face change in real time. The sharp lines softened. The steel loosened. In its place was something raw and open, something that made my chest ache. "She doesn't know anything else yet." I said, "But she will." He looked up at me then, eyes dark and wet. "I'll earn it." The door opened quietly, and Elena stepped inside. Her gaze took in the scene, Dominic holding the baby, me watching him, and something eased in her expression. "It's done," she said. Dominic didn't look away from his daughter. "All of it." "Yes, the people who came last night won't be coming back." She paused. "And the ones behind them have gone quiet." "For now," I said. "For now." Elena agreed. She left us alone again, closing the door softly behind her. Dominic shifted his weight, then lowered himself slowly until he was kneeling beside the bed, still holding the baby. The movement was instinctive, not theatrical, a man grounding himself. I used to think kneeling was weakness. He said quietly, "Something you only did when forced." I reached out, resting my hand over his. And now? And now I think it's the only honest position when something matters more than you. The baby made a small sound, her fingers curling reflexively around his thumb. Dominic froze, then laughed silently, awe lighting his face. "She has my grip," he murmured. "That's concerning." "Don't flatter yourself," I replied. "She has my stubbornness." His smile widened, genuine and unguarded. Later, after the doctor returned to check on us and declared both of us stable, Dominic helped me into a more comfortable position. He moved slowly, carefully, as if any sudden motion might undo the fragile peace. "I need to tell you something," he said once we were settled. I braced myself. "Go on." "There were orders given last night," he said, "on my behalf." I stiffened slightly, and I rescinded them. He continued, "All of them." I searched his face. "Why?" "Because they were made from fear," he replied. "And fear nearly cost me everything." Silence stretched. "You're not asking what the orders were," he noted. "I don't want to know," I said honestly. "I want to know what happens next." Dominic exhaled slowly. "Next, I dismantle the parts of my world that put you in danger. That's not something you can do overnight." "No," he agreed, "but I've already started." He told me then about alliances quietly loosened, about power redistributed in ways that didn't invite immediate retaliation, about men he trusted now, standing where he once stood alone. And if they see this as weakness? I asked. "Then they misunderstand me," he said calmly. I believed him. In the quiet hours that followed, the house settled into a rhythm I hadn't expected. Softer, slower, voices kept low, doors opened gently, no raised commands, no sharp footsteps. Dominic didn't leave my side except when forced by necessity, and even then, he returned quickly, as if tethered. At one point, while the baby slept between us, he spoke again. "I thought loving you was the most dangerous thing I'd ever done," he said. "And now, And now I know I was wrong. His hand brushed the baby's cheek lightly. Loving her is... I turned my head to look at him. That frightens you. Yes, he admitted. Because there is no version of this where I survive losing either of you. I took his hand. Then don't build a world where that's the cost. He met my gaze steadily. That's what I'm trying to do. Night fell again, gentler than the last. When the baby cried for the first time since being fed, Dominic startled so badly I laughed through the ache. He immediately sobered, rising and hovering uncertainly. I think she's hungry, I said. Or uncomfortable. Or both. He frowned. How do you know I don't? I admitted. I'm guessing. That's allowed. I smiled. Apparently. We figured it out together awkwardly. Imperfectly. Dominic watched everything I did with fierce concentration, memorizing movements, expressions, sounds. When she finally settled again, he exhaled like a man who had survived a battle. I've faced men with guns more calmly than this, he said. Welcome to parenthood. Later, when the house was quiet and the baby slept in a bassinet nearby, Dominic lay beside me, his arm curved protectively around both of us. He didn't sleep. I knew that. But his breathing slowed, steady and present. You stayed, I said softly. He kissed my hair. I will always stay. I closed my eyes, exhaustion pulling me under. As sleep claimed me, one thought lingered with aching clarity. The man who once ruled his world through fear had learned, finally, how to kneel. And that more than any power he'd ever held was what might save us all. Time did not heal us. It revealed us. Weeks passed, measured not by dates on a calendar, but by smaller, softer milestones, the way my daughter learned the sound of my voice, the way Dominic learned to sleep in fragments without losing himself, the way fear slowly loosened its grip on the house we lived in. We left the city quietly. No headlines, no spectacle, just a drive north along a winding coastal road, where the air smelled of salt and pine instead of steel and smoke. The new house stood apart from everything Dominic had ever owned before. It wasn't a fortress. It didn't loom. It breathed. Glass and stone softened by wood. Wide windows opening toward the sea. A garden that refused symmetry in favor of wild growth. It was beautiful in an unassuming way, as if it existed for living rather than watching. This isn't temporary, Dominic said as he carried our daughter inside, her head tucked carefully beneath his chin. I watched him closely. Are you sure? He nodded. This is where I want her first memories to be. Not protected, not hidden, just hers. The first night there. I woke to silence so complete it startled me. No footsteps, no distant murmurs through walls, just the ocean, steady and indifferent, and the soft sound of my daughter breathing in her crib beside the bed. Dominic slept. Truly slept. I lay awake, watching him in the faint moonlight. He looked younger like this unguarded, unarmored. The sharp lines of his face softened in rest, the weight he carried easing, if only for a few hours. For the first time, I allowed myself to believe this wasn't an illusion. The days that followed were slow, deliberately so. Dominic worked but differently. Meetings happened by phone, then less often. Elena visited occasionally, always calm, always watchful, but even she seemed to move more easily here, as if the place disarmed everyone who entered it. One afternoon, I found Dominic in the garden, kneeling in the dirt with our daughter strapped against his chest, carefully coaxing a stubborn vine to grow where he wanted it to. You know you can't control plants, I said, amused. He glanced up, mock serious. I disagree. I just have to listen longer. I laughed, and the sound felt lighter than it had in months. That night, after the baby fell asleep, we sat on the porch wrapped in blankets, the ocean stretching dark and endless before us. There's something I need to ask you, Dominic said quietly. I turned to him. That sounds ominous. He huffed a faint smile. I deserve that. He reached into his pocket, not for a ring, Not for anything polished or ceremonial, but for a folded piece of paper. He handed it to me. I opened it slowly. It was a deed. My name was on it. Only mine. "This house," he said carefully, "is yours. Not ours. Not mine. Yours." I stared at the paper, stunned. "Dominic, I know what a cage feels like." He continued, "I built too many of them without realizing it. I won't do that to you. Ever again. You don't have to prove anything," I said softly. "I'm not proving," he replied. "I'm choosing." The words settled deep in my chest. Months passed. Our daughter grew strong and curious, her laughter filling the house in a way no security system ever could. Dominic learned how to cook simple meals and failed spectacularly at baking. I returned to writing something I had abandoned long before Boston, before fear had taught me to fold myself smaller. Sometimes, the past surfaced. There were nights when Dominic came home quieter than usual, shadows clinging to him despite his efforts to leave them behind. When that happened, he didn't close himself off. He came to me. "I handled something today." He would say, not asking for forgiveness, not asking for absolution, just truth. And I would decide what I could hold. That was the difference. One evening, as the sun bled into the sea, Dominic stood beside me in the nursery now filled with soft toys, crooked drawings taped to the walls, evidence of a life being lived rather than guarded. "I used to think love was possession," he said. "And now," I asked, "now I know it's restraint." I looked at him, really looked at the man who had once terrified me with the depth of his devotion, who had learned slowly, painfully to love without chains. "You didn't become harmless." I said, "No." He agreed. But I became careful. Our daughter stirred in her crib, and Dominic went to her automatically, lifting her with practiced ease. She curled into him without hesitation, fingers grasping his shirt as if she had never known fear. I felt something settle inside me then. Peace. Not the fragile kind that shatters at the first sound of thunder, but the kind built slowly, deliberately, from trust. Later that night, as we lay together listening to the ocean, Dominic traced idle patterns on my arm. "I never asked," he said quietly, "why you stayed." I turned my head toward him. "You did ask, just not with words." And I stayed. I said, "Because you learned to stop when I said no. Because you learned to kneel without being broken. Because you didn't try to own my freedom, you protected it." His hand stilled. "That's all I ever wanted," he said, "to be worthy of choosing." I kissed him then slowly, deliberately, not out of need or fear, but out of certainty. The monster had not disappeared. He had transformed. And in the quiet house by the sea, with a child who slept safely between us and a future no longer written in blood alone, I understood the truth. I had once been too afraid to face. Some loves don't save you by erasing the darkness. They save you by teaching you how to live with the light. And this was not a golden cage. It was home.